my title is Research and Innovation Officer, and I will just do a brief introduction to JPI Urban Europe, and after that, Pascal will introduce more of the call. Next. Oh, sorry, next. Yeah. So JPI Urban Europe, the Joint Programming Initiative Urban Europe, is a member states initiative, or that is how we call it in Europe. It's, in other words, an intergovernmental initiative, and it's set up to support sustainable urban transformations by research and innovation. And we do this collaboration, this transnational collaboration, because if we don't get these urban challenges right, we risk lose the planet, at least for human kind of livability, we think. We also do it because we think that if you increase exchange and learning across borders, you actually gain and can progress a lot more than if you work in your own backyard, so to speak. And this is probably, I think, especially true for more innovation in support of urban transformations. So what we're dealing with is how to support global challenges, or tackling global challenges with that are also local in their particular situations. So the JPI Urban Europe vision is to be the hub to create and share knowledge and robust evidence for sustainable urbanization. And we do this with plus 20 funding agencies involved, or in other words, more than 20 countries. Although this is not just in Europe, as you see on the map. It has a core of European countries participating, but we also work with the Belmont Forum, which are in the call sustainable urbanization. That was USA, Brazil, Argentina, South Africa, Australia, Japan, Chinese Taipei, and so on. And we have also made calls with China, with the National Science Foundation. So in a way, we're also globally networking in this direction. Next. However, we are also kind of thinking more than simply project funding. It's a program, so we have other types of activities where projects, of course, are kind of central actors. We have dialogues and stakeholder input. We have policy discussions and evidence sharing, and also, for example, sharing and having exchange with other, or with Horizon 2020 projects, and in the future, hopefully, Horizon Europe activities. So we also then added to, let's say, the mere project funding, what we tend to think of as the family is also the kind of activities that we actually do to support the impact and the kind of innovative features of the projects that we fund, and especially connections and synergies between projects funded, also between different generations of projects and thematics, in order to shape critical mass to support urban transformations. Now, next, we have just a very, very small sample of 3 projects that we have funded in the past, and it's becoming more and more difficult, of course, the more projects we fund, to choose a couple to highlight. These are highlighted because they all use the approach of urban living labs in different ways. Smarter Labs had as one objective and produced a guideline on scaling these living labs up. Also a guideline on kind of what constraints you might anticipate when you're working with this, and especially if you're in a public administration working with this. The governance of urban sustainability transitions was more geared towards shaping knowledges around urban living labs for urban transitions, how you kind of harness them towards that. And not just academic knowledge, also finding more how they kind of work in the interfaces between research, innovation, and public administrations and civil society, and so on. UrbatX then, in the middle, produced a lab kit for the rookie, so to speak, in urban living labs context, which is simply a way of gaming your way in understanding why and how you might need to do an urban living lab, or if you actually need to do something else. And with that, I leave the webinar over to Pascal to introduce the call in question. Thank you very much.
So first, it's very easy to answer the first question, of course. Is it necessary to look for partners and making a consortium prior to the application? The answer is yes, of course. It is crucial, of course. It is necessary, of course, because the consortium is already at the pre-proposal stage, at the first stage. It's already a point that is assessed by the expert panel. So if you look at the list of sub-criteria in the third criteria for the assessment, that is on page 27 of the call text, you will see that this is a sub-criteria. So you have to have your consortium already complete for the pre-proposal stage. After that, we got a set of questions about the potential partners, especially the countries of these partners. First, you have to understand that only partners from the countries that participate explicitly, so the 16 countries that participate explicitly to the call, may be funded by the budget that was dedicated to this call. So the 22 million budget can only be used to support partners from these 16 countries. So actually, it's even a bit more complicated than that, because not, as I said, all funding agencies are able to fund all kinds of partners. So it's possible also that in some countries, they cannot support cities or so companies and so on. All this does not mean that partners from other countries cannot participate to a proposal, of course. But they will, since they will not receive funding directly for this participation, and therefore this means that they have to secure their own funding in order to be sure that they can really contribute, that they can contribute effectively to the project, and that they can achieve the task they are supposed to do in the project. So it's very important to give the information that these additional partners that will not be supported by the money we have their own funding in order to achieve the tasks they are supposed to do. And if you are unsure about the fact that this partner will not have such a funding or as a means to do the work, it's probably safer not to involve them as cornerstone or important partners of the proposal. Indeed, I remind you that the proposal and pre-proposal and proposal will be assessed by an independent expert panel. And if there is a doubt about the actual involvement of an important partner of the project, it may certainly be considered as a negative point for the evaluation of the project. So you have to think about that. And in my opinion, such partner should more appear like a I would say the image, the cherry on the cake than a large part of the cake. I also indicate, because there is a specific question about the United States, of course, perhaps some of you have learned that there was a discussion with NSF, National Science Foundation of the United States, in order to see if they will or not support American team participating to the call. Actually, it is still a discussion. There is no formal agreement so far about that. So I can't give you no more detail about that. And I think that at this point, you should consider team from America as any team from outside the 16 European countries. They will have in some way to secure their own funding and to say that they have the money to do this. If we have more information in the future about the support by NSF, of course, we will put the information on the web page of the call as soon as possible. That's true. And now I would try to answer the question about the budget. So it's a question 6. Can the availability of budget of certain participating countries affect the granting of the proposal? Of course, budget is always a limiting factor in order to support as many proposals as we want. The first rule is that funding agency fund only eligible partners from their country. For instance, in France, ANR will fund only eligible partner from France, and the same for Sweden, and the same for Netherlands, and so on. So, of course, this means that if you see that the funding agency, that your funding agency has just €1 million to spend in this call for proposal, please, it makes no sense to ask to build a proposal with a funding demand that exceeds this amount, of course, because your funding agency will not have the money even to support this proposal. So it's very important to set up a proposal that is compatible with the funding agency budget commitment. And this is why funding agency, most of them have indicated their available budget and also the number of proposals they would like to fund. So this will give you a range of number of proposals that I would like to fund, but also a range instead of amount of funding demand for each of these proposals. For instance, if they say that they have €1 million to fund projects and they would like to fund between 4 and 5 projects, this means that an average project funding demand should be between 200,000 and 250,000, something like this, euro of funding demand. That's the message behind this. Of course, we have also a little money from European Commission because it's a NERANET co-fund. So European Commission gives to the funding agency a little bit of money that we can use to have a common pot in order to fund more projects. For instance, if a funding agency exhausts very quickly his available budget, we can use this common pot, a small amount of money coming from European Commission, in order to support more money, to support more projects with this money. But of course, this is limited, and we cannot go very far with that. Okay, that's all what I wanted to say about the budget. Now, a question about cooperation and collaboration with cities and companies. So this question is quite hard to answer. I already gave some arguments, namely that each project is supposed to involve stakeholders. When I say stakeholders in the large sense, meaning people that are not directly, their profession is not just research, it's people from cities, from companies, from NGO, and so on. So every proposal is supposed to involve end users and practitioners. But we do not say that they should be involved as full partners. Actually, we expect the level of involvement may depend also on the kind of project. We obviously expect a strong involvement into a project of such partners in a project that is oriented towards innovation, for instance, or demonstration, and perhaps less in more oriented to research. But even for research, we also expect that participation of such stakeholders. But you can also consider involving them as not full partners, but for instance, through a steering committee that will follow the project from the start and reorient or orient the subject of the project during the duration of the project, and so on. So you have to imagine the best scheme that fits better to your subject and also to your type of project, how to involve these stakeholders. But it's important to involve these stakeholders in any proposal. Now I will go to the next question. Next question is about the definitions. Definitions. I will just refer you to the call text because they are precise on page 21 of the call text. On the first question, it's indicated in the web page 21 that each PI, for principal investigator, must only participate to a maximum of 2 proposals and only once as a PI of a main applicant. So no more than 2 proposals as partners and no more than 1 as main applicant. And now for the definition of a PI and a main applicant, it's very simple. PI is the person, it's the level of the person, it's the investigator itself. That is the lead investigator of a partner. An applicant is at the level of the institution. It could be a laboratory of a university, it could be a company, and so on. So it's a level of the organization. And the main applicant is the institution that coordinates the whole project. I think it is clear for everyone. Next question, and we have 3 questions actually that are more on the topics. I will try to answer them more globally rather than to answer them specifically. First, there is no thematic priority in the call text. It is not written somewhere that urban flight by rail is the priority. There is no such priority that is written in the call text. And all potential projects are welcome if you can explain why it's related to one or several of the challenges that has been described in the call text. urban mobility, urban accessibility and connectivity should be at the core of the project that you will propose. For instance, seismic resilience assessment of urban systems, for me, it's very borderline, not to say outside of the core, except if you can justify that it affects directly urban transport and urban mobility aspects. So you always have to justify why you propose this subject that seems to be borderline. You have to justify it with respect to what is described into the challenges and the relation with urban mobility and urban accessibility and urban connectivity. And finally, of course, you may start from a proposal that is building on previous achievements and tools. This is the link that you have at the bottom of this slide. It's a tool that has been already developed by someone. So you can always rely on previous achievements and tools that you have already developed. But of course, we do not expect yet to start with a blank page, of course. And actually, we really encourage to use existing knowledge and tools, but you have to construct a research or innovation proposal from that and explain clearly how it builds on these previous achievements and how it will help you to go beyond or further or to solve issues that have not been addressed yet. So you really have to say how your project is positioned with respect to the state of the art and previous things that you have done so far, and how the project will help you to go beyond that. That should be clear for everyone. And that's all. I'll stop here for the answer on the questions that have been submitted during the registration. And now we will have a session that is still online, but we just by chat, we will continue to answer, except if I can get some questions. Yes, it's difficult for me because I was presenting everything. So what we will do now is I will have a look through the list of questions that has been sent during my talk. And if I think that there are important questions that should be answered now, I will do it now. And by online by telling you. And I will also, after that, continue by chat to answer the questions with my colleague. So now I will just have a look. Okay, for instance, I will take this question because it's just happened to appear on my computer. Will proposals that combine research and innovation have a higher success rate? Or is it possible only to focus on research and innovation? I would say that it's up to you. You have to really to decide if you want to do research mainly, or if you want to do innovation mainly. Of course, we say that we can combine both, but in any case, at the end of the day, there are two pathways, so you have really to choose how you present your proposal. And they will not have a higher success rate. Actually, just one word about that. It's an important issue. Actually, we have observed that the assessment procedure, if we do not distinguish between research proposal and innovation-oriented proposal, there is a mismatch in success rate due mainly to the assessment of the project. It can be in one sense or in the other one. So this is why we decide not to combine in the same pathway research and innovation, but to separate them, to have clear criteria and sub-criteria for research and or for innovation, but not mix both. And actually what we will do also is that we will adapt the experts that will assess the proposal according to the orientation of the project. A research project will be assessed more by academic experts, I would say, even if we also consider to have practitioners that will also assess this kind of projects. And it will be the opposite for innovation project, where we expect that the project should have a more important impact and more rapid impact. So it will be more assessed by practitioners and academic researchers. So it's a very important point. About the money to be spent for hardware and investment, it completely depends on the funding agencies. For this kind of questions, you really have to get into contact with your national contact point in order to see what they can support. So I cannot say anything about that. It would be wrong. So I recommend you to take contact with the contact person of your country. I have a project from Canada. Sorry, I have a question from Canada. Canada is not, of course, a member of the founder of this call. So you can participate if you can justify, as I said, as for any other countries, if you can justify that you have secure funding to do the job. So you may participate, of course, to partnership, to consortium, but you really have to justify that you have the money to do the job. Okay. Next question. Is it possible to create a consortium that consists exclusively out of research institutions, universities? The answer is yes, of course. Especially if you would like to submit a project into the innovation pathway, you can do it. But you have to consider the fact that in the consortium of funding agency, there are many funding agencies that does not support innovation, for instance. So you really have to look carefully about that, to that point, to see if you can manage to have a consortium that could be supported by 3 different funding agencies from 3 different countries, having just companies, for instance, and cities. Perhaps this is the case, but you have to really to check that. A startup, yes. Question about a startup. Of course, startup can also participate to project, but again, this is somewhat related to national funding rules. So again, for this, you really have to contact the national contact point, because the rules are not the same for all funding agencies. Some are more reluctant than others to support the startup, for instance. I know that for ANR, it's a specific case in France. So it really depends on the funding agency. Do we supply budget for another participant partner? Again, this is a national regulation. Usually, there is a limit that you can use for subcontracting. This is the case for France, for instance. You cannot subcontract more than a certain amount of money from the funding that you receive. You can use this little bit of this money to support a subcontracting partner, but it's quite limited. So this is something that you should also ask to your funding agency if it's possible or not. Question, if the project could have a main focus on policy regarding energy, mobility, and data sharing, as well as framework for making this possible. There's a number of, okay. Yes, it's a question about the list of contact person. The list of contact person is already available in the annex of the call text. If you open the call text, the last 20 pages are dedicated to the rules for each funding agency, and also gives the name of the contact person. So if you read the call text, including the annex, you will find this information. Okay. I will go back into questions that were received before that in order to see if I can give some answer now, or if I will answer them just after that. Question again about the budget. Is the national agency funding only partner in its national territory? I think I already give the answer to that one. A funding agency funds only institutions that are in the national in the country, in the same country. That's clear. Okay. Okay, I think that's all what I see now. So you can continue to type your questions if you want. I'm looking through the list now. I don't know how to answer the question about the template. There is a question about the budget in the template. So of course it's a contribution, it's a partner contribution in euro. Of course, it's we talk just about euros. So if you are from a country that does not use euros, you have to convert them into euros. If this is the question, but I don't understand clearly the question. So now I have another question. Yes, as I said, the consortium needs to be formalized prior to the pre-proposal phase. It's not an intention letter. I should really, again, emphasize that it's not an intention letter. It is a pre-proposal. So you have to use a template that is provided online already on the web page of the call text. So you have to fill in this template with dedicated section explaining your project. So it's not just a free intention letter. It's already quite formalized. And the consortium has to be formalized already at this stage. It's very important because, as I said, this point is assessed already at the first stage. You may change a little bit the consortium between the two stages if you had the chance to be selected after the first stage. But most of the participants to the project have to be here from the first stage. For the funding of the associate partner at the pre-proposal stage, I would say not. because perhaps you need more time to clarify if they can secure their own funding. So I guess this will not be a very crucial point for the pre-proposal stage, but of course for the full proposal stage, this is an important point. Actually, at the pre-proposal stage, the expert will not look very carefully about the budget questions. It's a minor point at the pre-proposal stage, but it's a very important point at the full proposal stage. So if one partner of the partners is a company, does its funding constitute state aid? This I don't know. You really, it's country dependent. I don't know. So yes, when you build your transnational partnerships, I hope you contact your national contact point in each country, especially if you have any doubt about the kind of eligible partners or the kind of things that could be funded by this funding agency, if it's on equipment, if it's on manpower or things like this. So you really have to check that with your funding agency. I already answered the question about the consortium change in the full proposal. I would say yes, but this should be limited, and also it should be explained why in the full proposal. Strong involvement of stakeholders in the application form. If you have a letter of intent of associate partner, yes, it would be better also to send them because, as I said, you can also consider to have in your project association with stakeholders that are not full partners, so they will not appear in the list of partners, right? But they can be associated in some way. So in this case, it's much better if we have their letter of intent to do so in order to be sure that they are aware of that and that they will do the job that they are expected to do within the project. So the answer is yes to this letter of intent of association partner. Okay. Do the partner apply separately for funding? The answer is yes, of course, you have to separate the funding demand for each partner. Actually, you have an Excel sheet that you are supposed to fill in with a line for each partner. In this Excel sheet, so it's an Excel sheet about the funding demand. So you have to indicate for each partner what is the funding that is requested, and you to decompose into different kind of expenses on equipment and things like this, and manpower and so on. You have to do this for each partner in the consortium. I'm not sure to understand the question actually. What happens if in one country 3 projects get support and the project gets support and the other doesn't? Actually, you will submit a project that is totally independent of the other project that will be submitted in the call. Of course, they will be assessed in the same time by the same panel of experts, and they will be this panel of experts will make a single ranking list of projects to be supported in this call for proposal, but the projects are totally independent. A partner can appear in 2 projects, but that's allowed. But that's all. So I'm not sure to really understand this question. So there is a question if we would like to make 2 applications, one for implementation and one for research. Is it right that we as one organization cannot apply for more than one of these? Actually, the answer is that you can apply to more than 2 proposals as a leading partner. What is important to understand is that it's forbidden for one person, it's at the level of the person, to apply as a coordinator to more than one proposal. But as an institution or an organization, you can lead 2 projects. Of course, you should perhaps limit the number of such proposals, but it's allowed to have, for instance, for one laboratory or for one company, the leadership in 2 proposals. It's not a problem for that. Yes, okay. So the question, yes, I'm coming back to the question about the problem of project as assessed as a whole. It's not one partner that is assessed and another partner. It's a project by itself. We have an eligibility phase in this call where each funding agency say during this eligibility phase, I will support or I will not support this project. So this will disqualify the project, except if it still fulfills some conditions. For instance, if your proposal involve 4 partners from 4 different countries participating to the call, but one country say, this partner is not eligible for me, I cannot support it. So for me, the project is not eligible. But still, the project as a whole could be still eligible because there is still 3 partners from 3 different countries that are still eligible. So this project will be assessed without the partner that is not eligible, and that's all. I think that's the answer to this question. I say that mobility also includes mobility of goods, not just people. So it also includes, as I said at the beginning of this presentation, freight transport, of course. For the funding by yes, this is again a question about the funding budget, the budget available in each funding agency. As I said, you know already what is the budget that is committed by each funding agency and the number of projects that each funding agency would like to support, or the average amount of money that they would like to devote to each project. So you have to look at that in order to construct your funding demand, of course. But when we will select the project, it can happen that many of the projects, for instance, with German partners, it's just an example, with German partners, many projects are well ranked, and the German funding agency exhausts very quickly its available budget. In this case, as I said, what we can do is to use the European money. We have a limited amount of European money that is coming from European Commission in order to co-fund this call for proposal. So we can use this European money in order to compensate the gap between the funding demand of this country and the funding request. But we can, of course, since this is a limited amount of money, they can help to solve the problem for 1 or 2 projects, but this will stop at some point. Okay. Okay, difference between the first and second evaluation stage. First, the score system is not exactly the same into the two stages, because as I said, if you look carefully at the criteria for the selection of project, you will see that there are slight differences between the criteria used in the first stage and the criteria used in the second stage. Actually, the second stage has a more comprehensive set of criteria or sub-criteria than the first stage. In the first stage, we look only at some of the sub-criteria that are used in the second stage. For instance, on the budget, as I said, we do not look very carefully at the budget in the first stage because it's a sketch. Just at this level, it's just a sketch of the budget. We look at this more carefully in the second stage. So it's a bit different about that. And what is more important is that the second stage, you will have to develop a full proposal that will be much longer to explain in details your work program in the second stage than in the first stage. So the first stage is a sketch of the projects that you propose. You have to describe rather briefly, because it's not that long as a description of the project, that you have a limited number of pages. But in the second stage, will have much more pages in order to describe the different tasks and the work packages and so on. So you have to consider that the second stage is really the stage in which you really explain into details, more details your project and that. And it will be assessed against the whole set of criteria at this moment. Is the total funding volume of the planned project just simply the sum of the maximal? No, of course, I don't know how to answer this, because in some case, funding agency indicate a maximum amount of money for each project that they can support. So in this case, it's clear that you have to consider this limit. This is a maximum. In some cases, they indicate an average amount. So I guess that they accept to have not exactly this average amount on all projects. But as I said, you also have to consider that the global amount of money that is dedicated to this call by the funding agency, for instance, if they say that they have just 1 million to spend on the call, and they say that they would like with this million to fund about 4 projects. If you prepare a project that asks for support of €500,000, it could be a problem for them.
Okay, Pascal, this is Caroline at Urban Europe. What do you think? Should we round up or?
Yes, I think I will now try to finish to answer by writing the answer directly on the chat for some of the questions that I was not able to see or to. Yes, I will do that now as it was planned. Just I will write online the answer. And as I said, if you have any more questions, feel free to first, if it's a specific question for your own funding agency, please ask them directly. But if it's more general questions, you can also send us emails, and we can answer with my colleague Aurélien Gaufres, who is with me. Just the same table here. We will answer them rather quickly. Okay, thank you in any case.
Yes, and thank you. And let's keep the chat open for a little bit longer, and we wish everyone good luck in their process. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.